Welcome to the Tao at Night. Tonight we are resting with one of the most quietly reassuring images in all of Taoist teaching, the wellspring. Not the river, not the rain, not the reservoir, the wellspring. The place where water rises from the ground unbidden, in darkness, continuously, without needing to be filled from above. It is simply there. It has always been there. The drawing from it does not diminish it. The spring renews itself from a source that goes deeper than the well, deeper than the ground above it, into something that cannot be depleted because it does not depend on supply. Lao Tzu understood the self this way, not as a container of energy slowly spent down, not as a finite reserve of patience or care or attention that must be carefully rationed before it runs out, but as a wellspring, a place through which something inexhaustible moves, constantly, when it is unobstructed. What we call exhaustion in this teaching is not the spring running dry. It is the spring becoming obstructed. The water is still there. The source is still there. What is needed is not refilling. What is needed is the clearing that allows what is already flowing to flow freely again. Tonight's teaching is for anyone who has gone to bed feeling depleted, not just tired, but genuinely emptied out. The patience thin, the care diminished, the sense that there is less of you than there was this morning. The wellspring teaching does not dismiss this feeling. It offers a reframe. What you have been drawing from is not the whole of what you are. Beneath the surface that has been given and spent and worn thin, something else is there. Something that renews in the night. Something that was never, in truth, empty. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is, where you are listening from, and whether you are a front, back, or side sleeper. There are no wrong answers here, only fellow travelers finding their way to rest. So wherever you are right now, let yourself settle in. There is nothing to figure out. There is nowhere else to be. Thank you for joining us here at the Tao at Night. Let us begin. Lao Tzu wrote that the Tao is like a well, used but never used up, empty yet full. This is one of the great paradoxes at the heart of Taoist teaching, that the inexhaustible is not the vast, not the overflowing, but the thing that is always exactly sufficient. The well does not overflow. It does not announce its abundance. It simply provides to whoever draws from it exactly what is needed, and is no less for the providing. The model of the self as a container, a vessel with a fixed amount of something inside it, is so deeply embedded in how we think about energy and care and patience that we rarely notice we are using it. When we feel depleted, we say we are running low, running out, running on empty. The container model predicts that giving costs, that the more we offer, the less remains, that the responsible thing is to monitor how much is left and ration accordingly. The wellspring model proposes something entirely different. The giving does not cost the source. The water that rises through the spring is not a stored supply that can be exhausted. It is an expression of ongoing movement, of something deeper than the well itself, constantly rising, constantly available to whoever kneels at the source and draws. The spring is not diminished by the drawing. In some sense, the drawing is what the spring is for, and the spring, left unused, finds its own ways to move. Lao Tzu saw this quality in the Tao itself, the source of all things, from which everything arises and to which everything returns, which gives everything without being diminished. The Tao does not run low, and in the Taoist understanding, the self, at its deepest level, at the level below the surface energy that is indeed worn down by the day, participates in this same quality of inexhaustibility. Tonight, we are exploring what that means, what it would mean to rest not as a refilling of an empty container, but as an uncovering of a source that is always already full. There was once a young dervish who believed his devotion was running dry. He had been practicing for many years, practicing with genuine care and genuine consistency. His commitment to the work was not in doubt, either in his own experience or in the estimation of those who knew him. He had given himself to the practice in the full and literal sense, his time, his attention, his emotional resources, the particular quality of presence that the practice asked for and that he had learned over the years to bring. But he was tired now in a way that ordinary rest did not quite address. It was not the tiredness of the body, though he was sometimes physically weary. It was a particular kind of interior tiredness, the sense that the well from which he drew had been drawn from many times, and what he drew now was thinner than it had been, and he did not know how much remained. He brought this to his teacher, an old woman who had been a practitioner for most of her long life, and who had the specific quality of people who have been through many seasons of difficulty and have not, apparently, been emptied by any of them. "I feel as though the devotion is running dry," he said. He said it plainly. He was not looking for reassurance. He was reporting what he genuinely felt. His teacher listened. She was quiet for a moment. "Come with me," she said. She brought him to a small spring at the edge of the garden where she lived, a place he had walked past many times without looking at carefully. It was not much to look at, a low place in the earth where the water came up quietly, pooling in a shallow basin of old stone, running off in a small channel. Not dramatic, not beautiful in any obvious way, simply present. "How long has this spring been here?" he asked. "Since before this garden was made," she said. "Since before anyone now alive was born." "Does it run dry in summer?" he asked. "In drought?" "Not in any drought I have seen," she said. "Not in any my teacher saw, and she lived here before me." He looked at the water coming up from the ground. It was not a rushing thing. It was gentle, steady, quiet, a constant small rising that had been happening for longer than anyone could account for. "Where does it come from?" he asked. "No one knows exactly," she said. "Deep, very deep, deeper than the well that was dug beside it, which does run dry in bad years. The spring comes from something below what the well can reach." He sat with this. "You believe my devotion is like the spring," he said. "I believe," she said carefully, "that you have been confusing the surface water with the spring itself." She looked at him. "The surface water, the feeling of devotion, the warmth of it, the aliveness of it in the daily practice. This does vary. This does thin at times. This can genuinely be drawn down by difficulty or by the ordinary weariness of a long commitment." She paused. "But this surface is not the devotion. It is the expression of the devotion at a particular moment. The devotion itself is the spring, and the spring comes from much further down than the feelings that move on its surface. How do I reach it, he asked, when the surface thins? You stop drawing, she said, not permanently, not in the spirit of abandonment, in the spirit of this. She indicated the spring. You allow the surface to rest. You stop requiring the expression, and in the resting, in the simple allowing of what is there to be there without being immediately drawn off, the spring comes up. It has been coming up all along, but you have been drawing faster than you can see it arrive. He stayed at the garden for several days. He did not practice in his usual way. He sat near the spring in the mornings and he rested. He did not reach for the feeling. He did not ask himself to be devoted. He simply was. On the third morning, he felt something he had not felt in a long time, not the intense quality of devotion that he associated with his best practice, but something quieter and more fundamental, something that was simply there, without requiring anything of him. Present the way the spring was present, not dramatic, not announced, simply rising. He went back to his teacher. I felt something, he said. Yes, she said. It was not what I was looking for, he said. It was quieter. Yes, she said. The spring is always quieter than you expect. The surface water is the loud part. The spring itself is nearly silent. She looked at him steadily. And it has been there the whole time, not gone, not diminished, simply underneath what you were drawing from. Sufi teaching holds the concept of fana, the annihilation of the self, the dissolution of the individual ego into the divine, as one of the most advanced stages of the spiritual path. But before fana is a more ordinary and more practical quality. Tawakkul, the quality of trust in the divine as inexhaustible source. The tawakkul practitioner does not ration their giving because they have learned, through practice, through repeated experience of the spring replenishing, that what is given from the genuine source is not lost. It returns. The spring does not diminish. Rumi, in many of the poems of the Masnavi, returned to the image of the river of divine love that flows through the practitioner rather than from the practitioner. The important distinction is directional. The love that flows through the dervish comes from somewhere beyond the dervish, passes through and moves on. The dervish is not the source. The dervish is the channel, and the channel is not depleted by what passes through it. The channel's work is to remain open. There is also in Sufi teaching the concept of zuhd, renunciation, the simplification of the life that allows the channel to remain clear. Not emptiness as deprivation, but emptiness as openness. The full vessel cannot receive. The cleared vessel, the life simplified, the unnecessary things set aside, allows the spring to rise without obstruction. Think about the exhaustion that is not ordinary tiredness. The specific quality of depletion that comes not from physical exertion, but from sustained giving, from the long effort of care, of presence, of bringing yourself to something day after day. The parent whose patience has been thinned by the 10th version of the same conversation. The friend who has been the steady one through a long period of someone else's difficulty. the professional who has been giving their best to the work and has arrived at the end of a particular stretch at a place where the best is harder to find. This is the surface water thinning, and the container model says you have spent what you had. The wellspring model says you have been drawing faster than the spring can be seen rising. The spring is still there. The source is still there. What is needed is the specific quality of rest that allows the spring to come up rather than being immediately drawn off. This shows up in ordinary life in the difference between the night of genuine rest, where something lets go, where the drawing stops, where the spring is allowed to simply rise, and the night of surface rest, where the body is horizontal but the drawing continues in the form of replaying, planning, managing the still active concerns. The first kind restores, the second kind maintains at best. You may have felt this yourself in the experience of waking from a night of genuine sleep and finding that something had been replenished that you had not consciously been tending. The patience thicker than it was last night, the care more available, the quality of yourself that had been thinning, not quite so thin. The spring had risen in the night. It had been rising all along while the drawing stopped. Right now, in this breath, the drawing is stopping. The surface can be as thin as it is. The spring is below. And in the hours of this night, without requirement, without effort, without your management, something will rise. It always does. It has always done this. The spring does not need your help. It needs only the cessation of the drawing. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that the sage gives without diminishing. This is not the sage's achievement. It is not a special capacity earned through training. It is what becomes possible when the sage is not drawing from a personal supply, but allowing what moves through the Tao to move through them. The sage is not the source. The sage is the conduit. And the conduit is not depleted by what passes through it. This distinction between being the source and being the conduit changes everything about how we understand our own capacity to give. When we are the source, giving costs. Every gift is a transfer from a finite supply. The reserve goes down. The responsible thing is to monitor the level carefully and not give what cannot be afforded. When we are the conduit, when the giving is an expression of something moving through us rather than from us, the calculation changes entirely. The conduit's work is not to generate, it is to remain open. And the conduit that is open does not run dry because it is not the source of what flows through it. The Lakota tradition holds this understanding in a very practical and grounded form. The understanding that what is given in genuine service to the community does not deplete the giver in the way that other forms of expenditure do. The elder who has spent decades in genuine service is not a diminished person. They are, in most cases, a deeper one. The giving has not emptied them. It has, through the years of practice, made them more fully what they were always capable of being, more genuinely a conduit for what the community needs, and therefore more genuinely replenished by the community's life flowing back through them. There was once a young woman who believed that her strength had been used up in service to her people. She had given a great deal. This was not in question. For many years she had been one of the people her community turned to for counsel in difficulty, for steady presence in grief, for the particular quality of listening that was genuinely rare and that she had given freely, consistently, without counting. She had not given in order to be acknowledged. She had given because it was what was needed, and she was the one who had it to give. But now, after many years of this, she was sitting with a specific and unfamiliar feeling that the supply was lower than it had been, that the listening, when she brought it now, took more effort, that the steadiness, which had once felt natural, now required maintenance. She was doing the same things she had always done, but the quality of ease with which she did them had changed. She brought this to an elder, a man who had been a lifelong servant of his community in ways she respected deeply, and who was now in his very great age in a condition that she found quietly remarkable, not diminished by the decades of service, but enlarged by them, present in a way that the young rarely are, with a quality of calm that suggested the reserve had, if anything, deepened over the years rather than thinned. "How do you still have so much left?" she asked him. She asked it directly because she trusted him enough for directness. He smiled. He was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think I am drawing from?" he asked. She thought about it. "Your own strength," she said, "your own care." "I thought that once," he said. "It was very tiring." He looked at her steadily. "And then something changed. Not in the giving. I gave the same things, in the same ways. What changed was my understanding of where it was coming from." "Where does it come from?" she asked. "From what the people bring to me," he said. She had expected a different answer. She showed it in her face. He continued, "When someone brings me their grief, they bring more than the grief. They bring what they are, the depth of their caring, the realness of their love for the person they have lost, the specific quality of their life as they have been living it. All of this arrives with them." He paused, "And something in me receives it, not only the burden, but the aliveness. The grief is real, and it is heavy, but it comes wrapped in the life that produced it. And that life, its realness, its genuine engagement with loving and losing, feeds something in me." She sat with this. "You are saying the giving and the receiving are the same thing," she said. "I am saying they are the same water," he said. "The river flows from me and the river flows to me. When I am genuinely present with the people who come to me, something moves between us, not only from me to them. What they bring, genuinely received, returns to me as life." He looked at her carefully. "Where the service tires, I have found, is when I am giving from my own supply, when I am generating the care out of my own resources and delivering it, rather than allowing it to move through the genuine meeting." He paused. "The first way is a pump. The second way is a spring." She returned to her community with this. She did not immediately know how to make the change she described, but she began paying attention to the difference, the moments when she was generating care versus the moments when it was genuinely moving through the encounter. And gradually, over time, she found what he had pointed at. The encounters where something genuine was met, where the person brought their real situation and she received it fully. Those encounters did not tire her in the same way. Something in them fed her. The spring rose as it was drawn from, because the drawing was genuine and the channel was open. Lakota tradition holds the concept of watakuye, the service and giving that flows within the web of genuine relationship, not as a drain on the individual, but as a participation in the larger circulation of life force through the community. The one who serves genuinely is not using up their own supply. They are acting as a conduit for the community's own life, which flows through the individual and returns. The understanding of Mitakuye or Yasin, all are related, all are connected, provides the philosophical foundation for this. If all things are genuinely related, then what flows to the community flows from the community as well. The giving and the receiving are aspects of the same movement. The elder who gives decades of service to the community and ends those decades more alive rather than less has demonstrated this principle directly. The service, genuinely offered from the open channel rather than from the personal supply, fed the server as much as it fed the served. There is also in Lakota teaching the understanding of wakan, sacred power, the quality of life force that animates genuine engagement, as something that accumulates through genuine service rather than being depleted by it. The Wikasa Wakan, the person of genuine power, is often the person who has given most, not because giving creates power, but because genuine giving, the kind that flows through the open conduit rather than from the closed reserve, is an expression of the connection to the source that the sacred power draws from. Think about the giving in your life that has tired you and the giving that has restored you. They are not always the same giving, the same action, the same hour of listening, the same sustained presence through someone else's difficulty can come from two very different places and land very differently in the giver afterward. One kind leaves you thinner, the other kind leaves you, surprisingly, more present than you were before. The difference is not in the quantity given. It is in whether you were drawing from a personal supply or whether you were genuinely open to what was moving through the encounter. This shows up in ordinary life in the experience of a conversation that should have been tiring, long, emotionally complex, the kind of conversation you went into with some reservation about what it would cost, and finding, when it was over, that something had been added rather than subtracted. Not because it was easy, because something in the genuine meeting had fed you as much as it had fed the other person. You may have felt this yourself in the specific quality of genuine contact, the moment in a conversation or a shared task when the exchange becomes real in a particular way, when what you give is genuinely received and what the other person brings is genuinely received by you, and how different you feel at the end of that kind of contact from the end of an encounter where you gave from the surface, from the managed supply, from the generating rather than the flowing. Right now, in this breath, you do not need to give anything. The channel is at rest, and in the rest, what fills the channel is not supply carefully managed. It is the spring rising quietly in the dark from a source that does not sleep. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that a student of knowledge gains something every day. A student of the Tao loses something every day. This is a strange and somewhat alarming teaching, read from the outside. What is being lost? Surely the point is to gain, to develop, to grow, to become more capable. What is being lost in the Taoist understanding is the accumulation of positions, certainties, and defenses that fills the vessel and leaves no room for what the present moment actually contains. The gaining of knowledge is the filling of the container. The losing in the Taoist sense is the gradual releasing of the container model itself. The discovery that you are not a container of things, but a channel through which things move, and that the channel's capacity is determined not by how much it can hold, but by how freely it can pass through. The Stoic tradition arrived at a parallel insight from a different angle. The exhaustion of the philosophical student is not the exhaustion of someone whose supply is running low. It is the exhaustion of someone who is still carrying the weight of positions that can be set down. The student who has not yet learned to release what is being carried will find the inquiry increasingly heavy. The student who has learned to hold the inquiry lightly, to think well without needing to hold the conclusions, moves through the same territory with considerably less effort. The spring is not heavy. Water is not heavy. What is heavy is the vessel we have constructed to contain it. The Taoist practice is the gradual setting down of the vessel, the discovery that the water was not in the vessel after all, but flowing through a channel that does not need to hold anything. There was once a student who believed his capacity for genuine thinking had been exhausted. He had been studying philosophy for a long time. Long enough that the early stages of his study, with their excitements and their rapid reorganizations, had given way to something more settled. He knew a great deal. He had arrived at positions on many of the important questions. He had worked through many arguments, had tested many ideas against experience and against the responses of teachers and peers and the ordinary challenges of a life. But he had arrived, in recent months, at a place where the inquiry felt effortful in a way it had not been in the early years. The questions that had once produced immediate energy now produced something more like a familiar weight. He knew where the questions led. He knew what the available responses were. The territory was known, and he was tired of it. He came to his teacher with this. "I think I have used up the capacity for genuine inquiry," he said. He said it without particular drama. It felt like a report. His teacher, an older man who had been a philosopher for many decades and who showed no sign of the particular tiredness the student was describing, looked at him with mild interest. "Tell me what you mean by used up," he said. The student thought about how to describe it. "The questions no longer produce energy," he said. "They produce recognition. I know them. I know approximately where they lead. The movement of following them feels like retracing ground I have already covered." "And you interpret this as exhaustion of the capacity," the teacher said. "What else would it be?" the student said. The teacher was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and went to the small fire that was burning in the corner of the room. He took 2 pieces of wood and added them to the fire. "What happens to the wood?" he asked. "It burns," the student said. "And the capacity for burning in the wood, is it exhausted?" "The wood is exhausted," the student said. "That is why you added more." "Yes," the teacher said. He sat down again. "The wood is the content. The fire is not the content. The fire is the capacity, the quality of burning that the content feeds and that outlasts any particular piece of content." He looked at the student. "What you have used up is the particular arguments, the particular formulations, the specific content that has been feeding the fire. This is real, and it is normal, and it is the sign of genuine work. The wood is burned." He paused. "But the fire, show me where the fire of the inquiry is burned out." The student sat with this. "It doesn't feel like it's burning," he said. "Because you have not added new wood," the teacher said. "The fire needs new content, not new questions in the abstract, but new contact with the actual world, new experience, new material that has not yet been thought through." He looked at the student directly. "The inquiry is not a container of capacity that empties through use. It is a fire that requires new content to burn. When it feels dead, it is because you have been feeding it on the same wood for too long, not because the capacity for fire has been extinguished." He paused. "Go and do something you have not done. Go somewhere you have not been. Talk to people whose questions are not the ones you are used to. Bring the fire new material." He paused again. "The spring does not need to be refilled. It needs new ground to move through." The student took this seriously. He spent the following months differently, not studying in the usual sense, but engaging with parts of the world he had been neglecting in favor of the familiar questions. The fire found new material. The inquiry, supplied with genuine new contact, burned with a quality he had not felt in some time. Not the same excitement as the early years, something different, deeper, less dramatic, but genuinely alive. The spring had not run dry. It had simply needed new ground. Stoic philosophy holds the concept of home, the impulse toward genuine engagement, the motivating force that underlies all genuine philosophical inquiry. And the Stoic understanding of home is that it is not a supply that can be depleted. It is a quality of the rational nature itself, continuously present, continuously seeking expression. What can be blocked is not the home itself, but the conditions that allow it to express, the accumulated weight of unconsidered assumptions, the narrowing of attention that comes from staying too long in the same territory, the specific form of stagnation that the Stoics called acedia, the spiritual torpor that arrives when the life has become too comfortable and the inquiry has stopped generating genuine friction. Marcus Aurelius, in his private journals, described returning to the basic Stoic questions daily, not because the questions were new, but because the conditions of his life were constantly providing new material for the same questions to work on. The fire was constant. The wood was always new. The question of how to meet difficulty with equanimity was always the same question, and always freshly material, because the difficulty was always freshly presenting itself. There is also in Stoic teaching the concept of theoria, the capacity for pure contemplation, for seeing what is clearly and completely as a quality that is not diminished by use, but is, in fact, cultivated by it. The practitioner who has been genuinely thinking for many years does not have a diminished capacity for thinking. They have a more refined one. The fire has not gone out. It has found its more essential form. Think about the capacity in you that you have been treating as a finite supply. The creativity that you fear will run out if you use it too freely. The patience that you ration carefully because you do not know how much remains. The care and attention and willingness to engage that you have been monitoring with the anxiety of someone watching a gauge. In all of these, the container model is doing its work, producing the specific anxiety of someone who believes they have a fixed amount of something and is watching it go down. And the container model is mistaken. What you have is not a supply, it is a capacity, a fire, a spring. And the spring does not run lower from drawing, it is depleted only by blockage, by the specific accumulations of routine and assumption and unexplored territory that reduce the flow. This shows up in ordinary life in the creative person who fears producing their work because production feels like spending a finite supply, and how this fear produces exactly the blockage it is afraid of. The withheld work reduces the flow rather than preserving it, while the person who produces freely, who gives the creativity room to move through rather than holding it in storage, often finds the supply inexhaustible. The spring rises faster when it is drawn from. You may have felt this yourself in the specific experience of a period of creative or intellectual or emotional aliveness, when the giving was easy and the ideas were coming and the engagement was natural, and how that period was not the period of careful rationing, but the period of generous spending. The generosity was not depleting the supply. The generosity was uncorking the spring. Right now, in this breath, there is nothing to ration. The night is not a period of careful conservation. It is the period when the spring rises in the absence of the usual drawing. And what rises tonight is the specific, quiet replenishment of the source, not the surface energy that the day asks for, but the deeper quality that the day draws from. The fire's warmth, resting, grows back toward its center. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that returning to the root is called stillness. Stillness is called returning to one's destiny. This is not a passive image. The returning is something that happens when the outward movement ceases, not by force, but by the natural reversal that is built into every outward movement. The breath that goes out returns. The day that expands into activity contracts into rest. The giving that moves outward draws back, in the night, toward the source from which it came. The Taoist understanding of rest is specifically this: the return, not the absence of activity, but the return of attention to its source. The movement of daily life carries us outward into the tasks, the relationships, the demands, the responding and managing and giving that the day asks for. Rest is the movement back, not to a previous state, but to the source from which the outward movement drew, the root. The Hindu tradition holds a form of this in its understanding of the movement of consciousness itself, the outward arc of manifestation, pravritti, and the inward arc of return, nivritti. Both are necessary. The outward arc produces the world. The inward arc returns to the source. A life that is only outward, only pravritti, only the expansion and expression and engagement, is a life without return, which is the Taoist definition of imbalance. The wellspring model requires both the drawing and the returning. The drawing is the day, the returning is the night. The night is not the absence of the day, it is the inward arc of the same movement, and the source that it returns to is the same source that sends the day outward. The wellspring feeds both. There was once a young devotee who feared that his capacity for devotion was running low. He had been practicing his faith for many years. He had prayed and studied and served and attended the ceremonies that marked the rhythm of his tradition. He had brought himself to these practices with a genuine and consistent care that he valued and that his community recognized. He was, by any honest measure, a person of genuine devotion. But he was aware of a change. The practice felt less alive than it had in the earlier years. The prayers arrived in a different way now, not without sincerity, but without the specific quality of warmth and closeness that had been the hallmark of his best practice. The ceremonies, which had once produced genuine feeling, now produced something more subdued. He was doing all the same things. He was not feeling all the same things. He went to a temple elder, a woman of great age and long practice, who had seen many people through many seasons of the spiritual life, and who had a reputation for speaking directly and without comfort-giving. "I fear the feeling of devotion is leaving me," he said. She listened. She was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about the feeling," she said. "What is it like on the days when it is strong?" He described it, the warmth, the sense of closeness, the quality of aliveness in the practice, the feeling that the prayers were genuinely reaching something. "And on the days when it is thin," she said. He described this too, the dryness, the mechanical quality, the sense of going through forms without the substance. She listened to both descriptions. "I have heard you describe two things," she said, "the feeling of devotion and the devotion. These are not the same." "What is the difference?" he asked. "The feeling," she said, "is what the devotion produces when certain conditions are present. Good health, sufficient rest, freedom from acute difficulty, a certain quality of ease in the general life. These conditions allow the feeling to be present on the surface." She paused. "But the devotion itself, the genuine orientation of the self toward what is sacred, the commitment that has brought you to the practice daily for many years, regardless of how it feels, this is not the feeling, this is the spring. The feeling is the surface expression of the spring." "And the spring is still there?" he asked. "The spring has never been the feeling," she said. "The spring is the choosing to return, day after day, to the practice. This is not glamorous, it is not the thing you sing about, but it is what sustains everything else." She looked at him. The dervish in the dry season does not feel the river, but the river is still there. The feeling of the river depends on the weather. The river does not. He was quiet for a while. "What do I do with the dryness?" he asked. "You bring it to the practice," she said. "You do not wait for the feeling to return before you practice. You bring the dryness and the mechanical quality and the sense of distance. You bring it all, and the practice receives it." She paused. The wellspring does not require the practitioner to feel well before drawing from it. It requires only that the practitioner return to it. The returning is the devotion, and the devotion, the genuine, daily, sometimes dry returning, is the spring itself. He returned to his practice. He brought the dryness as she had suggested. He did not wait for the feeling. He trusted that the spring was beneath what the feeling showed on the surface. It was not immediately comfortable. The dryness did not vanish in the first days or the first weeks. He sat with the mechanical quality of the prayers, with the sense of speaking towards something he could not currently sense speaking back, with the ceremonies performed correctly and without any particular aliveness in the performance. He continued, not heroically, not in the spirit of endurance, which would have been another kind of straining, in the spirit of simply being the person who showed up. The spring, the elder had said, asks only for the returning. The returning was the devotion. He returned. There was a morning, several months later, when something changed, not dramatically, not announced, but perceptibly. The prayer arrived differently that day, not with the intensity he associated with the early years, with something quieter and more fundamental, the simple, direct sense of the practice as genuine rather than performed. He could not have said what had shifted. He had not done anything different. The feeling returned, eventually, not continuously. It moved as it always had with the conditions. But his relationship to its absence had changed. He knew now that the absence of the feeling was not the absence of the source. The spring was below the feeling, running in its own time, indifferent to the weather at the surface. He had been to the bottom of the dry season and found the spring still there. This was its own kind of knowing, quieter than the feeling, and, he suspected, more durable. Hindu philosophical tradition holds the concept of vairagya, non-attachment, the quality of genuine dispassion that allows engagement with the world without being defined by the world's response to that engagement. And vairagya in the context of spiritual practice is specifically the quality of continuing the practice without attachment to its emotional output, to continuing the prayer when prayer does not feel like prayer, the meditation when meditation does not feel meditative, the devotion when devotion does not feel devoted. The Bhagavad Gita makes this distinction in a very precise way. The teaching is to do the action without attachment to the fruit of the action. In the context of spiritual practice, the fruit is the feeling, the warmth, the closeness, the sense of genuine connection. The action is the returning, the practice, the daily choosing. And the teaching is to value the action for itself, not for the fruit it sometimes produces. The spring is not the feeling. The spring is the returning. There is also in Hindu teaching the concept of abhyasa, consistent practice, the quality of showing up to the practice with regularity regardless of the quality of the individual session. The Abhyasa practitioner does not evaluate each session against the best session. They return. The returning is the practice. The practice, sustained through the dry seasons, is what produces the depth that the wet seasons express. The wellspring is built through the dry seasons as much as through the wet ones. Think about the practice or the commitment that you have been measuring by its best moments. The relationship measured against its moments of greatest closeness and found wanting on the ordinary days. The creative work assessed against the sessions when the flow was present and found mechanical on the days when it isn't. The quality in yourself, the patience, the generosity, the genuine care, measured against the days when it was most available and found thin on the days when it isn't. In all of these, you are measuring the feeling against itself, and the feeling varies with conditions. It is not the source. The source is the returning, the consistent choice to be in the practice, in the relationship, in the quality, regardless of how it feels today. This shows up in ordinary life, in the specific experience of a long-term relationship that has moved past its most feeling-rich early phase into something more settled and less visibly warm, and the question of whether the settling means something has been lost. The feeling has changed. The devotion has not. The devotion is the continued choosing. The feeling is what the choosing produces under certain conditions. You may have felt this yourself in the experience of looking back at a period of your life when you were not certain about something, a relationship, a path, a commitment, and discovering from the distance that the continuation through the uncertain period had built something that the certain period alone could not have built. The dry season produced depth that the wet season expressed but did not create. Right now, in this breath, you are returning, not from choice exactly. It is happening in the natural way of things, the outward arc completing its turn toward the inward. The night receives the day. The root receives what the leaves gave out. And the spring rises in the roots unseen from a depth that the weather cannot reach. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that the space inside the vessel is what makes it useful. Not the clay, not the walls, the empty space, the receptive hollow that allows the vessel to hold anything at all. The usefulness of the bowl is its emptiness. This image is central to the wellspring teaching in a specific way. The monk who has given teaching for many years, who has been the vessel through which understanding has moved, may arrive at a place where the vessel feels empty. And the container model says, the vessel is spent. The wellspring model says, the vessel is ready. The emptying is not the depletion. It is the preparation for the next filling. Buddhist teaching holds this understanding in a very precise form. The monk who has given teaching does not lose the understanding by giving it. The teaching that passes through leaves the teacher more refined, not less. Like water flowing through a channel, the passing of the teaching does not diminish the channel. It wears it smoother, makes it a better conduit. The monk who is taught for many years has a more refined capacity for teaching, not a depleted one. But there is also, in the Buddhist understanding, a genuine emptying that precedes genuine filling, the willingness to release the accumulated knowing, the specific positions and formulations that have been working well for a long time in order to allow the understanding to move to a new level. The wellspring does not refill by topping up what is already there. It refills by moving, and the movement requires openness to receiving what the spring brings, which may be different from what was there before. There was once a monk who had been giving teaching for many years and arrived at a place where the well felt empty. He was a teacher of genuine quality. His students respected him and had learned real things from the years of his teaching, and the respect was justified. He had not been performing something he did not have. He had been genuine. But now, after many years of the same teachings offered to many students in many settings, he felt something he had not expected. A specific emptiness in the place where the teaching had come from. Not a loss of confidence, he knew his material. Not a loss of care for his students. He still wanted to serve them well. But the specific quality of aliveness in the teaching had thinned. The words arrived, and they were correct, and they were delivered with care, but they were familiar to him in a way that made them slightly effortful to give. He had said them before, many times, and the saying, once fresh, was no longer quite fresh. He brought this to an elder of his tradition, a woman who had been a teacher for much longer than he had, and who was still visibly alive in her teaching in a way he could only envy from where he currently stood. The teaching feels empty, he said. Not false, empty, like saying something that is true, but that I have said too many times for the saying to carry what it once carried. She listened. Yes, she said. She said it not as sympathy, but as recognition. This is what happens. What is it? He asked. The vessel has given what it accumulated, she said. What you learned in the first years, what you developed in the middle years, what you refined in the recent years, this accumulated in you like water in a vessel, and you have given it out, not wasted, genuinely given and genuinely received, but given. She paused. The vessel feels empty because it is empty, in that specific way. So what do I do? He asked. You learn to be empty, she said. He looked confused. She continued, the vessel that is full of its own accumulated knowing cannot receive what the students actually bring. It can only offer what it already has. But the vessel that has genuinely emptied, that has given what it had and knows that it has given it, and is not pretending to have more, this vessel can receive what arrives. She looked at him. Have you been genuinely receiving from your students these recent years, or have you been delivering what you brought to them? He thought honestly. Delivering, he said. Mostly delivering. Yes, she said. The wellspring requires movement in both directions. The spring rises and is drawn from, but the ground receives the rain that comes down, and the rain feeds the spring that rises. If you are only giving, only drawing from the accumulated supply, you are not allowing the return that feeds the spring. She looked at him steadily. Your students bring things to you. real things, their actual confusion, their actual questions, the specific places where the teaching does not yet fit their lives. These are not problems for you to solve out of your accumulated supply. These are new material, new ground for the spring to move through. She paused. Begin receiving, genuinely, not as a technique, with actual curiosity about what they bring, and see what rises. He came back to his teaching differently. He came with less to say and more genuine interest in what the students brought. And in the genuine interest, in the authentic receiving of what they carried, something began to move in the teaching again. Not the same as before, different, fresher, coming from a different place. The emptying had been real. The preparation it made was also real. The spring had not dried up. It had been waiting for the movement to shift. Buddhist teaching holds the concept of sunyata, emptiness, the quality of being without inherent fixed existence, not as a nihilistic absence, but as the condition of genuine receptivity. The empty bowl receives, the full bowl cannot. Sunyata, in the context of teaching and learning, is the specific emptiness of the practitioner who has released their accumulated knowing sufficiently to be genuinely present to what is new. The concept of dana, generosity, giving, in Buddhist teaching is specifically not the generosity of the person with a surplus giving from their excess. It is the generosity of the genuinely open hand. The open hand can give and can receive. The closed hand, which is hoarding what it has, can do neither. Dana is the quality of openness that allows the giving and the receiving to be aspects of the same movement. There is also in Buddhist teaching the specific understanding of prajnaparamita, the perfection of wisdom, as something that is not accumulated and held, but that arises in the genuine quality of open presence. The sage does not have more wisdom stored than the student. The sage has a more refined capacity for wisdom to arise in them, a more fully cleared channel, a more consistently open vessel. The spring is not larger in the sage. The sage has simply learned to get out of the way of what rises. Think about the emptiness you have been experiencing as depletion that might be, in the Taoist sense, preparation. The place in your life that has been fully given, the role you have been occupying, the understanding you have been working from, the version of yourself that you have been offering to the people around you, that has been so thoroughly expressed that there is nothing left of it to give in the old form. And how this feels from the inside, like running out, like having nothing, the emptied vessel, which is also the vessel ready to receive. This shows up in ordinary life in the specific experience of the period after a long and complete engagement, the project finally done, the relationship fully resolved, the chapter genuinely closed, and how strange and uncomfortable the empty space afterward feels. We have been so identified with the giving that the emptiness reads as loss. But the emptiness is the condition of the next receiving. The vessel has to be emptied to receive the next spring. You may have felt this yourself in the experience of a period of genuine transition between one life chapter and the next, between one understanding of yourself and the next, and how the period of transition felt like nothing, like emptiness, like the lack of something. and how what arrived in and through the emptiness was something that could not have arrived into the full vessel. Right now, in this breath, if you feel empty, let the emptiness be what it is. The vessel is not broken. It has been used. It has given what it had. And in this night, in the specific darkness of the emptied vessel, the spring begins again to rise, not refilling what was there, bringing what is next. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that the sage accumulates by giving and grows more as they give. The more they give to others, the more they themselves have. This is not a paradox in the Taoist understanding. It is the description of what happens when the giving is from the spring rather than from the supply. The supply diminishes. The spring, given freely, is replenished by the giving. The Hasidic tradition holds this understanding in a very specific and very personal form, the understanding that the specific quality each person carries, the nitzots, the divine spark, the particular way in which the divine light expresses itself in this specific individual, is not a finite resource. It is a living flame, and the flame, shared, does not halve, it multiplies. The candle that lights another candle is not diminished. The community with more candles lit is brighter, and the person who gives their particular light freely finds, again and again, that the giving does not empty them of light. It clarifies the flame, makes it more itself, more genuinely what it is. This is the teaching about the relationship between giving and receiving in the context of genuine personal vocation, the specific thing each person has that is theirs to offer. When this thing is given, when the particular light is shared rather than hoarded, something in the person becomes more rather than less. Not from any mystical mechanism, simply because the clarity of knowing what you have and giving it freely is more alive than the anxious guarding of what you fear might run out. The wellspring does not know it is a wellspring until it is drawn from. The light does not know it is light until it illuminates something. The giving is not the expenditure, it is the self-knowledge. There was once a young man who feared he had nothing left to give. He had been through a period of considerable difficulty, not dramatic difficulty, but the sustained, grinding kind that does not make for interesting stories, but that costs genuinely. A long period of responsibility at work, combined with difficulty in his family, combined with his own interior work, all arriving simultaneously in the way that life sometimes arranges these things. He had managed it. He had been present where he was needed. He had not failed anyone in any obvious way. But he had arrived, at the end of this period, at a specific feeling of interior emptiness. Not crisis, not breakdown. Emptiness, the sense that what he had been giving out of, the warmth, the humor, the particular quality of engaged attention that he knew was genuinely his to offer, had been thinned to something he could barely feel. He went to a Rebbe of his tradition, an old man of great wisdom and warmth, who had a specific reputation, that he always had time, that people always left his presence feeling more rather than less, and that this had been true for as long as anyone could remember. "I have nothing left to give," the young man said. The Rebbe looked at him with a quality of attention that was itself part of what he was known for, an attention so complete that people described it afterward as the feeling of being genuinely seen. "Nothing," the Rebbe said. "Not the way I used to," the young man said. "The things that used to come naturally. The warmth, the attention, the ability to be present with people in the way they needed. They require effort now. They used to just be there." The Rebbe was quiet. "Tell me something," he said. "When did the light of Shabbat first feel like light to you? Not as a child, performing the form. When did it genuinely feel like light?" The young man thought. He named a specific memory, a period in his early adult life. A particular Shabbat evening when something in the ceremony had landed differently than it ever had before, when the candles had seemed genuinely illuminating rather than simply burning. "Yes," the Rebbe said. "And what was happening in your life at that time?" The young man thought. It had been, he realized, a difficult period. Not the same difficulty as the current one, but a difficulty nonetheless. A time when he was not at his strongest. "A difficult time," he said slowly. "Yes," the Rebbe said. "The light is not always most visible in the easy times. The difficult times, when the ordinary brightness has thinned, are often when the light that is genuinely yours becomes visible as light, because everything else that was providing illumination has gone quiet." He looked at the young man. "What you feel as emptiness is a thinning of the surface layer. The warmth that comes easily, the humor that requires no effort, the engagement that flows naturally, these are the surface expressions of something more essential. They thin when the life has been heavy." He paused. "But they thin because the weight has been pressing the surface down toward the source. And the source, your particular light, the specific thing that is yours to offer, is still there. It is not diminished. It is simply more essential, less ornamented." "How do I find it again?" the young man asked. "You are already there," the Rebbe said. He said it simply, without drama. "The man who has nothing left to give and who comes to look for it. This is not the empty man. This is the man standing very close to the spring." He paused. "The spring is what remains when everything that was easier to see has thinned. The care that brought you here is the spring." The young man sat with this. After some time he felt, not the warmth exactly, not the easy humor, but something below those things, quieter, more fundamental, the small, steady thing that had been there through all of it, that had brought him here, that was not dramatic or interesting or particularly visible. The spring, quietly rising in the space that the surface resources had left. Hasidic teaching holds the concept of the nitzots, the divine spark, the specific piece of the original divine light that is embedded in each person, and that is, in the Hasidic understanding, their unique purpose and their unique offering. The nitzots is not the personality, not the talents, not the developed capacities. It is more fundamental than any of these. It is the quality of the divine in its specific, individual expression. The Baal Shem Tov taught that the purpose of each person's life is the release of their nitzots, the freeing of this specific divine spark from whatever has been containing it, so that it can participate in the ongoing repair of the world. And the teaching about the nitzots that is most relevant to the wellspring image is this. The nitzots is not depleted by its release. The divine spark shared is not diminished. This is what distinguishes it from ordinary resources. The ordinary candle loses wax as it burns. The nitzots, the divine flame, burns brighter as it is released. There is also in Hasidic teaching the concept of tzimtzum, the divine contraction, the making room that the divine performs to allow creation to exist. And this concept applies to the individual as well, the person who has contracted, who has made room, who has thinned and emptied through difficulty, has created the space for the nitzots to be more visible. The contraction is not loss. It is the precondition of revelation. Think about the essential quality in you that the difficulty has made more visible, the warmth that is more visible when the easy pleasantness is gone, the care that is more apparent when the effortful engagement has thinned to the genuine engagement. The specific thing about you that has remained through the difficult period, that has not been taken by the weight, that is, perhaps, the truest expression of what you actually are. Difficulty is a refining fire. Not because difficulty is good, it is not in itself good, but because what remains in the fire is what is genuinely there, beneath the surface accretions, the nitzots, the spark that is yours. This shows up in ordinary life in the specific quality of the person who has been through something very hard, genuinely hard, not performatively hard, and who has a quality of presence afterward that is different from what they had before, not better in every way, but more essentially themselves, more genuinely there. The difficulty stripped away what was surface and left what was essential, and the essential thing is the spring. You may have felt this yourself in the experience of a period of genuine difficulty, producing a quality of clarity about what you actually value, what you actually are, what actually matters to you, a clarity that the easy periods did not produce. The fire revealed the substance. The contraction made room for the revelation. Right now, in this breath, the surface is thin. This is all right. What remains when the surface thins is not nothing. It is the spring, the essential light, the specific spark that is yours, still burning, quietly in the darkness of this night, not requiring the surface to be thick, simply burning, as it has always burned, from the source that cannot run low. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now, not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote about the quality of Wu Wei, effortless action, action that arises from the nature of things rather than from the forced effort of the will, in terms that make it clear this quality is not laziness or passivity. It is the action of the spring itself, not the action of someone pushing water upward, but the action of water that has found its source and is simply expressing what it is by moving where it naturally moves. The Zen tradition holds this image of effortless action in its most aesthetic form, the brushstroke that arrives, the poem that is given rather than constructed, the response that comes from the place below deliberation. These are not accidents. They are the expressions of long practice that has descended to the level of genuine source. The practitioner who has practiced long enough that the practice has become genuinely theirs, not a technique they are applying, but a quality they are expressing, has arrived at the wellspring of their own art. But the path to this wellspring runs through something that feels like exhaustion before it feels like source. The student who is still effortful, who is still applying technique, still monitoring the result, still managing the practice, has not yet found the spring. They are drawing from the surface, and drawing from the surface is tiring in a way that drawing from the spring is not. The Zen teacher who asks the student to keep practicing when practice feels exhausted is pointing at this. The exhaustion is the surface thinning, which is the condition that allows the descent toward the source to begin. What is on the other side of the exhaustion is not more surface. It is the spring itself. There was once a student who was exhausted from practice and could not see what more the practice could give. She had been sitting in meditation for many years. The early years had been rich with experience, the mind settling, the awareness opening, the specific quality of the practice producing real changes in how she moved through her days. The practice had given a great deal. She was not the same person who had begun. But recently the practice felt like carrying something rather than drawing from something. She arrived at her sitting cushion with a sense of obligation rather than genuine desire. The sitting produced sitting, quiet, formal, correct sitting, but not the quality she associated with the best of her practice. Something had thinned. She brought this to her teacher, a monk of many decades of practice who had the specific quality she felt she had lost, an ease in the practice, a naturalness, as though the sitting were simply what he did rather than something he was doing. "The practice is exhausting me rather than sustaining me," she said. Her teacher looked at her with mild interest. "Good," he said. She blinked. "Is it not a problem?" she said. "Everything you were drawing from on the surface has been used," he said. "This is good. This is the practice working." He looked at her steadily. The surface resources, the initial excitement, the experience of change, the specific satisfactions of early practice, these are real and they have their time. But they are surface resources. They thin. They are supposed to thin. He paused. "What is below the surface resources?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "I can't feel anything below the exhaustion." "Yes," he said, "the exhaustion is what you feel when the surface is gone and you have not yet found what is below. This is the difficult place." He paused. "But I will tell you what is below. I have been there." He was quiet for a moment. "What is below the exhaustion is the quality that was practicing all along, not you practicing exactly, but the quality of awareness that is the ground of the practice, that has been present in every session since the beginning, that was never tired because it was never the one doing the work." You have been doing the work. The awareness was simply being aware. She sat with this. How do I find it? She asked. Stop trying to practice, he said. In the next sitting, arrive at the cushion, sit, and then stop trying to do the practice correctly. Stop monitoring the result. Stop maintaining the form. Just be there. He paused. The awareness does not need to be produced. It is not a technique. It is what you are, at the level below what gets tired. She sat the next morning with this instruction. She arrived. She sat. She stopped trying. And in the stopping, in the specific quality of exhausted non-effort that she brought to the cushion, something occurred that she had not expected. Not a dramatic experience, not the return of the early richness. Something quieter and more fundamental, the simple, direct sense of being present without the apparatus of the practice between her and the presence. The awareness, simply aware, not tired, never tired. She understood then what her teacher had meant. The practice had not been running low. She had been drawing from the wrong level. Zen teaching holds the concept of jinin, naturalness, the spontaneous self-so quality that is the expression of genuine alignment with what things are. Jinin is not achieved, it is uncovered. The practitioner who has been working at the practice for long enough, who has burned through the surface resources and arrived at genuine exhaustion, and who in that exhaustion releases the effortful doing, this practitioner may find what was always already present beneath the doing. The Zen koan tradition uses paradox and exhaustion deliberately. The student who has been working a koan for months or years and who arrives at genuine intellectual exhaustion, who has tried every approach and found none sufficient, is, in the Zen understanding, close to the breakthrough. Not because exhaustion produces insight, but because the exhaustion produces the release of the effortful mind, and in the release, what was always present becomes visible. There is also in Zen teaching the concept of tathata, suchness, the quality of things being exactly what they are, without the layer of interpretation and management that the ordinary mind adds. And tathata is not something the practitioner adds. It is what remains when the adding stops. The spring is not produced by the practice. The practice is the clearing of what blocks the spring. Think about the exhaustion in your practice, in whatever practice gives your life its direction. The specific tiredness that comes not from working too hard, but from working at the wrong level, from drawing from the surface resources that are appropriately used in the beginning, and that thin as the genuine depth becomes available. The place where the practice feels like carrying rather than drawing. This is not the sign that the practice has failed. It is the sign that the surface has been thoroughly used and the practice is ready to descend, not to a different practice, deeper into the same one. This shows up in ordinary life in the experience of any long-term engagement, a creative practice, a relationship, a professional commitment that has moved past its initial richness into something that requires more deliberate effort. And how this can look like the engagement going wrong when it is actually the engagement deepening past the stage where it could run on surface resources. You may have felt this yourself in the specific experience of a creative or professional or personal effort reaching a point where everything that had made it work in the early stages was no longer sufficient, where you had to find something else, something deeper, something that the easy early period had not required. And how what you found in that necessity was something more genuinely yours than what the easy period had produced. Right now, in this breath, if you are exhausted, let the exhaustion be what it is, not failure, the surface thoroughly used. And beneath the surface, the awareness that was never tired, that was present in every moment of the practice, that is present now. Not the you that was practicing, the awareness itself, simply aware, in this breath, in this body, in this night. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now, not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote about the nature of the Tao as that which gives birth to one, which gives birth to two, which gives birth to 10,000 things, and then receives them back. The giving is not a spending, it is an expression. And the expression returns. The 10,000 things do not disappear the source. They emerge from it, are sustained by it, and in their dying return to it. The Celtic tradition holds a specific and very beautiful form of this in its understanding of the relationship between the land and the stories the land gives rise to. The land is not diminished by the stories that arise from it. The stories are the land's expression, the living record of what the land has offered to the people who have walked it and loved it and been changed by it. And the stories, when they are genuinely told, return to the land as care, as the quality of attention that the telling produces in the listener, which flows back into the relationship with the place. The wellspring is the land, the stories are the spring, and the teller is the channel through which the spring moves into the world. The teller does not own the stories. The teller holds them for a time and passes them on, and the holding does not diminish the teller. The genuine holding, the carrying of the stories with care, the offering of them with full presence, is what the teller was shaped for. It is the expression of the spring, not the depletion of it. There was once a bard who believed the stories had run dry. She had been a storyteller for most of her adult life, a carrier of the old stories of her tradition, the tales that had been held and passed on and embellished and refined through many generations of tellers before her. She had received them from her teacher, who had received them from theirs, and she had made them her own through the years of telling. They were genuinely hers, and they were genuinely the traditions, and both of these things were simultaneously true. For many years the telling had been alive, the stories arriving with a freshness that she could feel in the telling and that the listeners could feel in the receiving. The stories knew what each gathering needed. The telling shaped itself to the occasion. She had been a good vessel for the tradition. But she was aware of a change. The stories were still there, still intact, still hers to tell. But something in the telling had become more effortful. She could feel herself bringing them rather than allowing them. She was managing the story rather than simply telling it. And the listeners could not articulate what had changed, but she could feel in their quality of attention that something had. She went to an elder in her tradition, an old man who had been a storyteller for longer than she had been alive, and who still told with a quality that had not thinned in all his years. "The stories feel like they are running dry," she said. He looked at her with a kind of quiet attention. "Do you go to the land?" he asked. "I tell the stories of the land," she said. "That is different from going to it," he said. He looked at her. "The stories come from the land. They are the land's expression, in the form of words, through the people who have walked it and remembered what the walking showed them. The tradition holds these expressions. You carry these expressions." He paused. "But the expressions come from something that is not the tradition. The tradition is the carrying. The land is the source." He looked at her. "When did you last walk the old places, the places where the oldest stories live?" She thought. It had been some time. "Go," he said simply, not with the intention of gathering material, not with the notebook or the studious attention of the collector. "Go the way your ancestors went, as people who belonged to the place, who were returning to something that knew them." He paused. "The stories do not run dry in the land. The land keeps giving. What runs dry is the connection between the teller and the source. And the source is not inside you. It is between you and the place." She went. She walked without agenda. She spent days in the old places, the hills where the oldest stories had their settings, the water where the spring figures had their origins. She was not gathering. She was visiting, returning. She did not immediately feel the spring refill, but over the following weeks, when she told, the telling was different. She could not have said exactly what had changed. The stories were the same stories, but they arrived differently, as though they had been refreshed at their source, rather than taken again from the accumulated store. The land had given them back, as it always did, when the channel between teller and source was reopened. Celtic wisdom traditions hold the understanding of dinsanchas, the law of places, the living record of what each place in the landscape holds, as a form of genuine ecological relationship. The stories are not separate from the land. They are the land's memory, held in human form, passed through the generations of those who walked that land and attended to what it showed them. The bard in the Celtic tradition is specifically a keeper of this relationship, the person responsible for maintaining the living connection between the community and the land that sustains it. And the bard's capacity is understood as coming from this relationship rather than from any personal supply. The bard who tends the relationship, who walks the land, who returns to the source, who allows the land to speak rather than speaking for it, is the bard who has access to the inexhaustible. The bard who draws only from the accumulated store without returning to the source will find the store eventually thins. There is also in Celtic tradition the concept of Caia Dies, genuine friendship, the quality of relationship that deepens over time and through genuine attention, applied not only to people but to places. The kayadias between the bard and the specific landscape that their tradition is rooted in is a relationship that requires tending. And like all genuine relationships, it is not a reservoir but a spring, not a finite supply but an ongoing, mutual, living connection that renews through the quality of the attention brought to it. Think about the source of your capacity that you have been drawing from without returning to. The relationship that sustains you, that has been receiving from you without your having returned to be sustained by it. The practice that feeds you, that you have been maintaining without genuinely attending to. The place, physical or otherwise, that is your particular spring, that you have been away from longer than you realized. The wellspring requires the returning, not because the source runs low without the returning. The source is always there, but the channel between you and the source requires maintenance. The channel that has been used without being renewed becomes, over time, a one-way thing, which is not what a channel is. A channel moves in both directions. This shows up in ordinary life, in the experience of returning to a place that matters to you, a physical place, a relationship, a practice, after a period of absence, and finding that the returning itself produces something, not only the thing you expected to find, the quality of the return, the specific freshness that comes from having been away long enough that the place is genuinely new again when you arrive back. The spring has risen in the interval. You may have felt this yourself in the experience of returning to something, a friendship, a creative practice, a way of being in a place, after long absence and finding it more vital than you remembered. Not because it changed, because you came back genuinely rather than habitually, because the return was a genuine meeting rather than a continuation. Right now, in this breath, you are returning to the source. The night is the returning. The body is the place where the spring lives. And the attention you bring to this breath, the genuine noticing of what it is to be here, in this body, in this night, is the tending of the channel. The spring is already rising. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now, not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that the sage does not contend, and therefore no one can contend with them. This teaching about non-contending is also a teaching about how we draw on our own resources, whether we are drawing in contention with what we lack, straining toward a supply that seems insufficient, or whether we are drawing from the settled confidence of the spring that does not need to contend because it simply is. The Ubuntu tradition holds the wellspring teaching in a very communal and very specific form. The understanding that the individual's capacity for care, attention, and genuine service to the community is not located inside the individual. It is located in the relationship. The spring is between the individual and the community, not within the individual alone. And the spring between them is fed by both, by what the individual brings to the community and by what the community brings to the individual, and runs most freely when both directions of the flow are genuine. This means that the community leader who is running dry has, in the Ubuntu understanding, a specific diagnosis. The flow in one direction has become dominant. Either the leader has been giving without genuinely receiving, or the community has been taking without genuinely seeing the giver. Either way, the channel has become unidirectional, and unidirectional channels do not work as springs. They work as pipes, and pipes run dry when the supply at one end is exhausted. The repair, in the Ubuntu understanding, is not more giving and not more receiving. It is the restoration of the genuine mutual movement, the reopening of both directions of the channel so that the spring can function as a spring again. There was once a community leader who had been exhausted by years of service and could not understand why the elder she most admired had not been. She had given genuinely. This was not in question. The community she served had received real things from her years of commitment. She had shown up consistently, had been present through the difficult periods, had brought herself to the work with care that went beyond obligation. She was not someone who had done it for recognition or for comfort. She had done it because she cared. But she was tired now in a way that was beginning to feel structural. Not the tiredness of a hard week or a difficult season, a bone-level tiredness. The kind that was still there after the good nights of sleep, still present when the circumstances were easy. She was giving from a place that was getting very low. An elder who had served the community for many more years than she had, and who was visibly not tired in the same way, came to sit with her one afternoon. The younger woman described what she was feeling. The elder listened with the quality of genuine attention she was known for. "How do you not run dry?" the younger woman asked. She asked it as she meant it. Not as a complaint, but as a genuine question. The elder was quiet for a while. "Tell me about the last time someone in the community genuinely thanked you," she said. "Not formally, not in the public way, but genuinely, came to you privately and told you something specific that you had given them that had mattered." The younger woman thought. She could not immediately recall a recent instance. "And the last time someone came to you with something that genuinely surprised you, a quality of their life, an understanding they had, something in their story that you had not expected and that gave you something?" she thought. This was also harder to recall than she would have expected. The elder said. She was quiet for a moment. "You have been giving very well for a long time, but you have been managing the receiving." "What do you mean?" the younger woman asked. "The genuine receiving," the elder said, "requires something that is uncomfortable for the practiced giver. It requires genuine vulnerability. The willingness to be given to, really given to, not just acknowledged, to be genuinely moved by what someone brings, to admit that you needed something and that they provided it." She looked at the younger woman. "You have been maintaining a specific quality of having things together, which is real and it is useful. But it means that when people come with their genuine gifts, their gratitude, their stories, their specific quality of life, you receive them from behind a slight distance, grateful but managed." She paused. "The spring between you and the community runs in both directions. But you have been standing slightly to the side of the receiving end, and the spring on one side has dried." The younger woman sat with this. "I don't know how to receive better," she said. "You begin by admitting it," the elder said. She meant, now to me in this moment. You have just admitted that you are tired. That is the beginning. When someone next comes to you with genuine appreciation, let it in. Not all the way immediately, it takes practice, but a little further than you have been. The spring on your side will begin to refill when the channel opens. She tried this. It was harder than it sounded. The habit of managed receiving was deeply embedded, but gradually, over time, she noticed something. The encounters where she allowed herself to be genuinely given to, where she let in the appreciation, the surprise, the specific quality of what people brought. Those encounters left her more restored than the ones where she had remained, however warmly, behind the management. The spring in the genuine meetings ran in both directions, and the two-directional spring was entirely different from the one-directional giving she had been trying to sustain alone. Ubuntu philosophy holds the concept of Ubuntu itself, the quality of genuine humanness, the being a person through other persons, as the specific mechanism of the communal spring. The individual's humanity is not located within the individual. It is continuously constituted through genuine relationship with others. This means that the individual cannot run dry in genuine relationship, because the spring is between rather than within. The running dry is always a symptom of genuine relationship having been replaced by managed exchange. The concept of ukupana, genuine giving, in Ubuntu tradition is specifically the giving that maintains the genuine relationship rather than the giving that performs service. The performance of service can be exhausted. The genuine relationship cannot, because it is a spring rather than a supply. The genuine relationship renews through the quality of the genuine meeting. There is also in Ubuntu tradition the concept of indlela, the way, the path, the manner of moving through the community, as something that must be walked in both directions. The elder who has served the community for decades and is not exhausted has walked it in both directions, has given and has genuinely received. This walking in both directions is not a compromise of the service. It is the condition of its sustainability. The spring runs in both directions, or it does not run. Think about the receiving you have been managing rather than allowing. The appreciation that arrives and is acknowledged but not quite let in. The genuine care that people offer that you receive graciously but from a slight distance, warmly managed rather than genuinely received. The gifts that the people in your life are giving you that you are, in various ways, deflecting before they can actually land. The one-directional spring is exhausting precisely because it is working against its own nature. The spring wants to run in both directions. The giving and the receiving are the same water, and the habit of managing the receiving, the practiced self-sufficiency of the competent giver, is what turns the spring into a pump, something that requires effort to run and that runs dry when the effort cannot be sustained. This shows up in ordinary life in the specific experience of being in the presence of someone who is genuinely grateful to you, who is bringing real appreciation for something real that you gave them. and the quality of that experience when you allow the appreciation to land versus when you deflect it with grace. The deflection is polite. The allowing produces something neither of you could predict. A quality of contact, a quality of mutual reality that the managed exchange cannot produce. You may have felt this yourself in the specific moment of allowing yourself to be genuinely moved by what someone offered you, to be visibly moved, to not manage the response, and how different the quality of connection in that moment was from the quality of connection in the moments when you were keeping it together. Right now, in this breath, something is being given to you. The night itself, the silence, the specific darkness that holds you without requiring anything in return. Let this in, not managed, not acknowledged and set aside, genuinely received. The spring is running in both directions. You are in the receiving end of it now, and the receiving is the rest. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that in following the Tao, one is protected from harm. Not because the Tao intervenes, but because the person who moves with the Tao moves with the nature of things. They do not exhaust themselves in fighting what is. They move with what moves. They rest when rest is what is. They give when giving is what is. And in this alignment, the source replenishes itself naturally, in its own time, without any requirement of the person to manage the replenishment. The Polynesian tradition holds this understanding in one of its most concrete and beautiful forms, the understanding of the cycles of the ocean, the way that what the sea gives in one season it is replenishing in another, the way that the fisherman who understands the cycles does not exhaust the sea, but moves with its natural rhythms of abundance and restoration. The sea is not a supply, it is a spring, and the spring's nature is not depletion, but cycle. The human system has its own cycles, its own seasons of abundance and restoration, its own rhythms of outgoing and incoming, its own patterns that the person who attends to them can learn to read the way the fisherman learns to read the sea. The exhausted person has, in most cases, been overriding these cycles, pushing through the restoration period, drawing during the season of replenishment, refusing the rest that the spring requires to rise again. The wellspring does not fail. The wellspring is interrupted by the person who will not allow the natural cycle of drawing and resting that the spring's nature requires. There was once a fisherman who believed the ocean had given all it had for the season. He had been fishing the same waters for most of his life. He knew them well, knew the seasonal patterns, the behavior of the fish, the places where abundance gathered, and the places where it moved on. He was not a careless fisherman. He had paid genuine attention to the ocean over many years and had learned a great deal. But this season had been different. The usual patterns had not produced what they usually produced. The places that had always been reliable had been quiet. He had worked harder and come back with less. And he had arrived at a private conclusion. The abundance was gone. An elder of his community, a man of very great age, who had fished these waters longer than anyone living, and who still went out with a quality of unhurried attention that the younger fishermen found hard to understand, came to sit with him one afternoon when the boats were in and the day's poor catch had been put away. "You believe it is gone," the elder said. He said it not as a question. "The fish are not where they have always been," the fisherman said. "No," the elder said. He agreed simply. "They are not where they have always been." "So they are gone," the fisherman said. "Or they are where they have not always been," the elder said. He let this sit for a moment. The ocean does not give all it has and then stop. The ocean gives and rests and gives differently. He looked at the fisherman steadily. "What you have learned is where the fish were. Where they are now is a different learning." He paused. "The season of the usual patterns is a resting season for those patterns. The fish are somewhere else, not absent, and somewhere else which you have not fished because you knew where the fish were. The abundance is present now." He looked out at the water. "The ocean cycles. The abundance moves. What the fisherman who knows the cycles knows is not where the fish are. It is how the fish move, where they go to rest before they return, what the signs are that tell you the return is coming." He looked at the fisherman. "You have been fishing a single season's knowledge for many seasons. The ocean has been giving you different knowledge, and you have been reading it as absence." The fisherman sat with this. "Where are they?" he asked. "The signs have been there," the elder said. "The water temperature, the behavior of the birds, the small fish that move ahead of the larger ones. You have been looking for the fish. These signs have been telling you where the fish are going." He paused. "The ocean is not running dry. The ocean is not done giving. It is giving differently, and it will return to the familiar patterns in the familiar season. But right now it is offering something different." He looked at the fisherman. "The question is whether you can receive what it is offering now, rather than grieving what it is not offering." The fisherman went out the next morning with different attention, not looking for the familiar patterns, but attending to what was actually there, the signs the elder had described, the water, the birds, the small fish. He found something, not what he had been looking for, something different. But the catch that day was the best he had had in months. The ocean had not run dry. He had simply been looking in the wrong direction. Polynesian wayfinding and fishing traditions hold the concept of ike, knowledge, understanding, the specific knowing that arises from genuine relationship with the ocean over time, as something that must continuously be renewed rather than applied from a fixed stock. The navigator or fisherman who has learned the ocean has not accumulated a supply of knowledge that can simply be drawn down. They have developed a relationship with a living thing that is always moving, always changing, always offering something new. The knowledge must be constantly refreshed through genuine attention to what is actually happening. The concept of pono, rightness, the quality of being in genuine alignment with the natural and social order, applies in Polynesian tradition to the fisherman's relationship with the ocean as well as to human social relationships. The fisherman who takes from the ocean in the season of abundance and rests in the season of replenishment is living in pono. The fisherman who ignores the cycles and draws constantly is disrupting the pono, the alignment, and eventually damages both the resource and themselves. There is also in Polynesian tradition the concept of mana as something that accumulates through genuine relationship and through the quality of genuine attention brought to what the ocean offers. The elder fisherman of great mana is not the one who has caught the most fish. It is the one who has been in genuine relationship with the ocean for the longest, who has received what the ocean offered in each season, including the seasons of offering differently, and who has accumulated the knowing that comes from that long, genuine attention. Think about the cycle in your life that you have been overriding. The natural rhythm of your own energy that the current version of your life has been asking you to ignore. The restoration period that you move through as quickly as possible in order to return to the productive period. The season of offering differently that you have been reading as absence. The ocean is cycling. What you have been fishing is resting. The abundance has not gone. It has moved, as it always moves, in its own rhythm. And the appropriate response is not to fish harder where the fish are not. It is to attend to what is actually being offered now, which is different but not less. This shows up in ordinary life, in the experience of a period when the work that has always come easily is harder. And rather than reading this as a change in what is being offered, reading it as failure of the capacity. The capacity is fine. The season has changed. What the present season is offering is different from what the familiar season offered. And the fisherman who can receive what is being offered now, who can work with the current season rather than grieving the previous one, finds that the abundance did not leave. It simply moved. You may have felt this yourself in the specific quality of a period that felt like drought, but turned out to be a different kind of fertility. The fallow season that produced, not in the way you were looking for, but in the form of rest or clarity, or the specific kind of learning that only absence produces. The fish were not absent. They were somewhere else, preparing to return. Right now, in this breath, the ocean is cycling. You are in a particular moment of the cycle. The night is the resting season, the season when the surface is still and the fish are somewhere deep and quiet, and the drawing has stopped and the spring is rising. You do not need to work at this. The cycle is working. Your part is to rest in it. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote about returning, the returning of the 10,000 things to the source, the returning of the human being to the root, the returning of the active to the still. This returning is not a defeat. It is the completion of the natural cycle. The active period was the outward arc. The rest is the inward arc of the same movement. Both are necessary. Both are the Tao. The Aboriginal Australian understanding of country and season holds this in a very grounded form. The understanding that the land itself cycles through seasons of giving and seasons of receiving, and that the people who belong to the land cycle with it rather than against it. The season when the land is resting, when the visible abundance has subsided and the surface of the country is quiet, is the season when the deep renewal is happening. The seed is underground, the roots are drinking, the song lines are being refreshed from the source that lies below the visible surface. The person who belongs to the land cycles with the land. The season of their outgoing, the active giving expressing period, has its complement in the season of their inward returning. And the inward returning is not a lesser time. It is the time when the wellspring rises, when what has been given out finds its source again, when the drawing stops and the spring catches up to where the drawing had been. The night is the land's resting season. The sleep is the person's resting season. And in both, in the land's dark quiet and in the person's dark quiet, the spring is rising. There was once a young person who felt that the country had nothing left to give. She had grown up deeply connected to the country of her people, the land that held the song lines, the sacred sites, the plant and animal presences that had been in relationship with her family for as many generations as memory held. She had been taught the land carefully and genuinely. The land was not scenery to her. It was living. It was relational. It was as close as family and as nourishing. But the country had been going through a difficult time, not from any single cause, but from the accumulated pressure of many things: weather that had changed, pressures from outside, the wearing that long difficulty produces in any living thing. The land that had always been abundant had seasons of thin offering. The plants were less, the animals were quieter. The ceremonies, held in the same places as always, seemed to be received by a country that was tired. She was sitting with an elder, an old woman who had been in relationship with this country her whole life, who had seen it in many conditions, and who did not appear to be troubled by the current thinness in the way the young person was. "The country seems empty," the young person said. She meant it carefully, not as a statement of fact, but as a feeling she was bringing. The elder was quiet for a while. "What season does a seed need?" she asked finally. "Dark," the young person said, "and cold and quiet." "Yes," the elder said, "and what does the seed look like in that season?" "Nothing," the young person said. "You cannot see it." "Nothing," the elder agreed. "The seed in the dark ground looks like empty ground. The person who does not know seeds might look at this ground and say, 'Nothing is here. The country has given all it has.'" She looked at the young person steadily. "But the seed is there, and the root is drinking. And the country that looks empty on its surface is the country that is doing its most essential work, the work that the visible abundance cannot do, because visibility requires resources, and the season of invisibility is the season when those resources return to the root." "How long does it last?" the young person asked. "As long as it lasts," the elder said simply. "The season turns when the country has restored what the previous season gave. Trying to hurry, it gives nothing." She paused. "The country asks something of us in this season. It asks us to trust what we cannot see, to continue the ceremony for the empty ground as we would for the full one, because the ceremony is for the country, not for what the country is currently producing. It asks us to stay in relationship when the relationship is not giving in the familiar way." She looked at the young person. "The staying is the water that the country drinks in this season. Our presence, our attention, our ceremony for the empty seeming ground. The young person continued the ceremony. She came to the country when it was quiet. She did not demand that it produce. She stayed in the relationship. The season turned, as seasons do. The land that had been quiet began to offer again, not all at once, not dramatically, but genuinely. The plants came back. The animals returned. The ceremonies were received by a country that had replenished itself in the quiet season, in the dark season, in the season when the spring had been rising below the visible surface. Aboriginal Australian knowledge traditions hold the understanding that the relationship between people and country is not a relationship of use, not the drawing from a resource, but a relationship of mutual care. The country cares for the people, and the people care for the country, and this mutual caring is what sustains both. The country that is genuinely cared for, walked, sung, ceremonialized, attended to, is the country that gives most generously. And the giving is not depletion. It is the expression of a living relationship. The concept of gura, home country, the country that knows you, includes the understanding that the country's capacity is not diminished by the relationship with the people who belong to it. The relationship is the spring. The country that is in genuine relationship with its people offers itself. The offering does not exhaust the country. The country that has been neglected, that has not been walked and sung and ceremonially attended, is the country that thins, not from overuse, but from the severance of the relationship that sustains both parties. There is also in Aboriginal Australian tradition the understanding of chukurpa, the dreaming, the living law of the country, as a constantly replenishing source. The chukurpa is not a finite teaching that will be used up if too much is drawn from it. It is the living relationship between the country and its people, continuously generating the understanding that both need. The spring of the chukurpa rises as it is drawn from, not depleted by the drawing, but renewed by the genuine relationship that the drawing represents. Think about the fallow season in your life. The current one, or a recent one, or the one you sense coming. The period when the visible offering has thinned. When what you have been drawing from is not giving in the familiar way. When the ground looks empty. The seed is underground. The root is drinking. What is happening in the invisible depth of this season is the most essential work of your renewal, not the most visible, not the most satisfying to your sense of progress, but the most essential, the work that the active season cannot do. This shows up in ordinary life in the experience of the winter of any kind, the quiet period, the low period, the period when the life seems to be giving less, and the specific quality of trust that the winter asks for. Not a naive trust that ignores the thinness, a trust based on experience. This is not the first winter. The ground knows how to do this. The spring knows how to rise. You may have felt this yourself in the experience of a period of apparent emptiness that produced, eventually, something that could not have come from the abundant season, the quality of clarity or depth or genuinely changed understanding that only the fallow season generates. The seed in the dark ground, the root drinking the hidden rain. Right now, in this breath, you are in the dark season of this day. The night is the country's fallow time, the time when the visible work stops and the invisible work begins. The root is drinking, the spring is rising. You do not need to see it to benefit from it. The country knows its season, the body knows its night, and in the dark, quietly, the wellspring does what it was made for. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that the Tao is the mother of the 10,000 things. This maternal image is significant. The mother does not diminish by nourishing. The nourishing is what the mother is for. And the mother, in the deepest Taoist sense, does not experience the nourishing as cost. It is the expression of nature, not the depletion of a supply. The Mayan tradition holds a version of this teaching in its understanding of the relationship between the cycles of the calendar and the capacity of the keeper. The keeper does not tire of the calendar. The calendar does not tire of being kept. The relationship between the keeper and the cycles is not one of supply and demand. It is one of mutual participation in something that moves through both the keeper and the kept. But the Mayan tradition also holds an honest recognition. The keeper does tire. Not because the calendar is tiring, but because the keeper is human, and humans cycle. And the keeper's cycle is not the same as the calendar's cycle. The calendar turns in its vast arcs of hundreds and thousands of years. The keeper turns in the much shorter arc of a human life. And the keeper who mistakes their own weariness for the weariness of the cycle has misread the situation. The cycle is not tired. The keeper needs to rest. The wellspring is the calendar. The keeper is the human being who tends it, and the human being's need for rest is not a limitation of the wellspring. It is simply the nature of the vessel through which the spring moves. The vessel rests, the spring continues, and when the vessel wakes and returns to the tending, the spring is exactly where it always is, rising, as it has always been rising, from the depth that does not tire. There was once a young keeper of the sacred calendar who feared that the cycles were running out of power. She had been keeping the calendar for many years, not as an archivist, but as a genuine practitioner, a person whose daily life was organized around the rhythms of the sacred count, who brought genuine attention to the ceremonies that each day in the calendar required, who held the cycles as living realities rather than abstract systems. It was a demanding practice, sustained over many years, and she was tired. She was tired in the way that the long-term practitioner tires, not from any single day or month, but from the accumulation of years of genuine engagement with something that required her consistent presence. And she had found, in the recent period, that the cycles seemed less vivid to her. The ceremonies she performed with the same care and the same correctness as always, but without the quality of aliveness she had once felt in them. The calendar kept turning, as it always had, but her sense of being genuinely in contact with what it was turning through had thinned. She brought this to a master keeper, a man of very great age, whose own engagement with the calendar was legendary in his community, who had kept it through conditions that would have broken less dedicated practitioners. "The cycles feel like they have lost some of their power," she said. He listened. "Tell me," he said, "when you are very tired, when you have been traveling or through a difficult period, does the sun seem less bright than on the rested days?" She thought. "Sometimes," she said, "it seems further, less immediate." "Is the sun further?" he said. "No," she said. "No," he agreed. "The sun is exactly where it always is. Your perception of it is filtered through the tiredness." He paused. "The cycles are not less powerful. They are turning with exactly the force they have always turned with. The great cycles do not tire. They are older than anything that tires." He looked at her gently. "What has thinned is the channel. You. Not because you have been negligent, you have been faithful, but because the channel has been in use for a long time without sufficient restoration." He paused. "The spring has not changed. The vessel needs to rest. But the ceremony must be kept," she said. "Yes," he said, "and it will be kept. The calendar does not wait for the keeper to be fully restored before it turns. But the keeper who rests, genuinely, not just the surface of resting, returns to the ceremony with the quality of presence that the ceremony deserves." He looked at her. "You are not the source of the cycle's power. You are the one who tends the channel between the community and the cycles. And the channel, right now, needs tending." He paused. "Rest. Return. The calendar will be there. It has been there longer than any keeper who tended it. And it will be there still, turning in its vast arcs when you return with the vessel rested and the spring clear." She rested. She stepped back from the full weight of the tending for a period, allowing others to carry what could be carried while she genuinely restored. And when she returned, she felt what the Master had described. The cycles had not changed. They were exactly as they had always been. What had changed was the clarity of the channel. The spring was visible through it again, rising as it had always been rising, from the depth that had not for a moment stopped. Mayan cosmological tradition holds the concept of Chul, the sacred life force that animates all living things and that moves through the cycles of the calendar in its own vast rhythms. The Arch-Age, the day-keeper, is the human channel through which the community receives the specific quality of Chul that each day in the sacred calendar carries. This is a real and important responsibility. It is also a responsibility that the Arch-Age carries not as a source, but as a conduit. The distinction matters in the Mayan understanding. The Arch-Age, who forgets they are a conduit and begins to believe they are the source, will exhaust themselves. The Arch-Age, who knows themselves as a conduit, who keeps the channel clear and open and genuinely aligned with what passes through, can sustain the practice through an entire human lifetime without the specific depletion that comes from thinking you are generating what is actually flowing through you. There is also in Mayan tradition the concept of the cyclical renewal of the keeper as well as of the cycles. The traditional practice includes specific periods of retreat, of silence, of restoration, not as interruptions of the keeping, but as integral to it. The keeper who is restored is a better channel than the keeper who is depleted, and the cycles are best served by the keeper who knows when to step back from the active tending and allow the channel to refill. Think about the cycle you have been tending that has not tired, even when you have. The relationship that continues with its own rhythm, regardless of whether you have the energy to track it. The creative practice that has its own seasons and its own logic, indifferent to your current supply of enthusiasm. The long commitment whose depth is not reducible to your feeling about it on any given day. These cycles do not run dry. They are not diminished by your weariness. They simply continue in their own time with their own vast indifference to the state of the channel through which they express. Your weariness is the vessel's weariness, not the cycle's, and the vessel, when it rests, will return to tending what has been turning all along. This shows up in ordinary life in the experience of returning to a long-standing commitment, a relationship, a creative practice, a vocation, after a period of genuine rest, and finding it exactly as it was, no less real, no less present. The cycle had been turning the whole time you were away. The rest did not interrupt it. The rest prepared you to receive it again. You may have felt this yourself in the specific quality of the return after genuine rest, the way the familiar thing is seen freshly, the way the long relationship is met with something closer to the quality of the early days, the way the practice that had become effortful becomes, for a time, easy again. The vessel rested. The spring is clear. The cycle turns as it has always turned. Right now, in this breath, the calendar is turning. In ways you cannot see or feel or measure, the vast cycles are completing their quiet arcs. The spring is rising through the dark. Your part is to let the vessel rest. The tending will resume. The cycles will be there when it does. And the spring will be exactly where it always is. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now, not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Lao Tzu wrote that the Tao that gives rise to all things does not strive, it does not contend, it does not run dry. The Tao is the wellspring of the world, not because it generates everything from itself, but because everything arises from it and returns to it, and it is diminished by neither the arising nor the returning. The Norse tradition holds a final and distinctive form of this teaching in its image of the two wells that sustain the world tree Yggdrasil, the well of Erd, tended by the Norns, the weavers of fate, and the well of Mimir, the well of wisdom and memory from which Odin drinks. Both wells are springs that feed the tree that holds the world. The tree draws from them. The wells do not run dry. The drawing is, in some sense, what the wells are for. But the Norse tradition also holds a teaching about the human quality that most resembles the spring, the quality they called huga, the deep mind, the inner faculty of genuine wisdom and courage, and its relationship to rest. The huga is not depleted by use in the way that surface energy is. The huga is the spring, but the huga is most fully itself when it is not constantly required to produce, when there is a period of rest in which it returns quietly to its own nature. The young warrior whose courage has been used in many battles is not a warrior with depleted courage. The courage is still there. What is depleted is the surface energy, the readiness, the alertness, the edge that constant engagement produces. And what the rest restores is not the courage itself, which was never gone, but the access to it, the connection between the person and their own spring. There was once a young warrior who believed her courage was depleted. She had been tested genuinely. This was not a question. She had been in the difficult places that required courage and had brought it consistently. She had not faltered in any external sense. She had done what was required of her in the situations that required it, and the quality of her conduct in those situations was not in question. But she was aware of something she had not expected, a kind of interior thinning. Not cowardice, she did not believe she was afraid in the ordinary sense, but a quality of readiness, of aliveness to the next thing that had been present in her when she had first been tested and that was, now, harder to find. She still had what was required, but she could not find it as quickly. It was deeper somehow, less immediately available. She brought this to a wise woman in her community, a woman of great age who had seen many warriors through many stages of their lives and who had a specific reputation for honesty that did not comfort but that was genuinely useful. "I feel as though the courage is being used up," the young warrior said. The wise woman looked at her. "Used up," she repeated. "Tell me where you keep the courage." The young warrior was momentarily at a loss. The question did not quite make sense. "It is what I draw on," she said, "when I need it." "Where from?" the wise woman said. The young warrior thought. "From myself," she said. "From, I don't know exactly." "No," the wise woman said. "No one does." She was quiet for a moment. "But let me tell you what I have observed over many years of watching people in the situations that require courage. The ones who seem to have used it up, who were in the condition you are describing, had in most cases been in a particular kind of constant engagement. Not merely difficult engagement, constant engagement, without the intervals. The intervals, the young warrior repeated. "The resting periods," the wise woman said. "Not the nights of sleep. Something longer. The periods when you are not required, when no one needs you to be ready, when you can simply be the person who does not currently need courage because nothing is currently required." She looked at the young warrior steadily. "Courage is not a supply that can be exhausted, but the quality of aliveness that allows you to access it quickly and completely does require rest. Not rest in the abstract, genuine rest, the kind where you are allowed to be, for a period, something other than a warrior." "And if there is no such period," the young warrior asked, "then you draw from deeper and deeper layers until the access is slow," the wise woman said, "which is what you are describing. The courage is there. It is at the depth of you, unchanged, but the path between you and it has become long and effortful because you have been walking it without pause." She paused. "The wellspring does not dry, but the path to it can become overgrown when it is not walked in both directions, the going to draw and the returning to rest." She rested, genuinely, for a sustained period, Not the brief respite between demands, but the real resting. And in the resting, she found what the wise woman had described. The courage had not moved. It was exactly where it had always been. What had returned, in the rest, was the clarity of the path, the directness of the access, the quality of aliveness that was, she understood now, not the courage itself, but the relationship between her and her own depth. The wellspring had never run dry. She had simply needed to rest long enough to find her way back to it. Norse tradition holds the concept of hugger, the deep mind, the inner faculty of wisdom, courage, and genuine perception, as something that is located not in the surface awareness, but in the depth of the person, below the fluctuations of mood and energy and circumstance. The hugger is not the same as the person's current emotional state. It is what remains when the emotions have been accounted for, the specific quality of genuine character that the person's life has produced. The understanding of the Norns, the weavers of fate at the Well of Erd, is specifically that they tend the well that feeds the world tree. The tending is their work, and the work of tending is not the work of generating. The Norns do not produce the water of the well. They tend the space in which it rises. They keep the channel clear. They maintain the conditions in which the spring can do what springs do. There is also in Norse tradition the concept of drengskaper, the quality of being a genuine person, of genuine character, as something that grows through the years of genuine engagement and genuine rest. The drenger who has been tested and has rested and has been tested again and has rested again has a quality that the one who has only been tested does not yet have. The alternation between engagement and genuine rest is what produces the drengskaper. Neither alone is sufficient. Both together produce the spring that does not run dry. Think about the quality in you that you believe has been used up, that you cannot currently find with the speed and completeness that it was available before. The courage, the patience, the care, the creative aliveness, the specific quality of engagement that is genuinely yours and that is, right now, at a depth that requires more time and more effort to reach than it did at other points. It has not gone. It is at the depth of you, unchanged. What has changed is the path between you and it, lengthened by sustained engagement without the intervals, the access made slow by the constant drawing from a path that has been walked in only one direction for too long. The rest is the return. This night is the return. Not dramatic, not a ceremony. Simply the suspension of the drawing, the cessation of the requirement, the specific quality of not being required that allows the path to clear, the overgrowth to recede, the direct access to return. This shows up in ordinary life in the experience of waking after a genuine night of rest and finding that the quality you had feared was gone was simply at a distance. Findable again, available again, present again without the effort that it required the previous evening. Nothing changed. The night was the path clearing, and the morning finds you, perhaps not fully restored, but oriented again toward the depth. The wellspring visible again, the access returned. You may have felt this yourself in the experience of emerging from a period of genuine rest, a true holiday, a genuine interval, a real suspension of the usual requirement, and the specific quality of aliveness that greeted the return to engagement. The engagement met from the depth rather than the surface. The courage found quickly rather than slowly. The path cleared. Right now, in this breath, the path is clearing. The night is clearing it. Not through effort. You are not doing anything to help. The clearing happens in the specific quality of genuine rest which you are now in. And in the morning the path will be shorter, the access more direct, the wellspring more visible. The spring has been rising all night. In the morning you will drink from it, and the drinking will be different from what it was last night. Not because the spring changed, because the path is clear. Let us pause here for a moment. Take a breath. Notice how you are feeling right now. Not how you think you should feel, just how you actually feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Tonight we began with an image from Taoist teaching. A wellspring bubbling up from underground in the dark, renewing itself from a source that goes deeper than the well, deeper than the ground above it, into something that cannot be depleted because it does not depend on supply. And over 13 chapters, we let that image open into everything it carries. We sat with a young dervish who discovered that the devotion he feared was running dry was the spring, not the surface, and that the spring, left to rise without the constant drawing, filled the vessel that he had believed was empty. We traveled with a woman who had given decades of genuine service and found, in the genuine meeting rather than the managed giving, that the spring between her and her community ran in both directions. We watched a student discover that the fire of his inquiry was not depleted, only in need of new wood. New genuine contact with the world that the same questions had not yet touched. We accompanied a young devotee who learned that the feeling of devotion is not the devotion, that the spring is the choosing to return, day after dry day, which the feeling only sometimes illuminates. We sat with a monk who discovered that his emptied vessel was not the end of his capacity, but the preparation for a different and deeper receiving. We listened as a young man found, in the contracting that difficulty produced, the essential light that the surface resources had been obscuring. We watched a student find, at the bottom of her exhaustion, that the awareness which was the ground of her practice had never been tired, could not be tired, because it was the spring and not the practitioner. We accompanied a bard who returned to the land because the stories had thinned in the carrying, and found that the source had been giving all along to whoever came genuinely back to it. We listened to a community leader discover that the receiving, genuinely opened, was the same water as the giving. We traveled with a fisherman who learned that the ocean's changing offer was not the depletion of the ocean, but its cycling, and that what it was offering differently was still genuine abundance, readable by different attention. We walked through the fallow country with a young woman who learned to trust the seed underground, the root drinking in the dark, the season of invisible renewal. We attended the calendar keeper who learned that she was not the source of what she kept, that the cycles were turning, unchanged, and she was the rested or the tired channel through which they expressed. And we sat with a young warrior who found that her courage was never gone, only that the path to it had grown long from the constant walking in one direction, and that the rest cleared the path. Across all of these, the teaching is the same, and it is the one we began with. You are not a container of a fixed amount of something that is slowly spent down. You are a wellspring, a place through which something inexhaustible moves, when the channel is clear and the drawing is balanced by the genuine rest that allows the spring to rise. What we call exhaustion is real. We are not dismissing the thinning of the surface resources, the weariness of the vessel, the specific and genuine depletion that sustained engagement without genuine restoration produces. All of this is real. The body is genuinely tired. The patience is genuinely thinner than it was this morning. The care is genuinely harder to find than it was yesterday. But beneath all of this, beneath the surface that is worn, beneath the vessel that needs rest, the spring is rising. It has been rising all night. It does not need your management to do this. It does not need your supervision, your effort, your anxiety about whether it is happening. It is happening. It is what the night is for. And in the morning, the surface will be fresher than it is right now, not because you did anything to make it so, but because the spring rises in the dark without being asked. This teaching is not completed in a single night. The container model is deeply embedded. The anxiety about supply, the monitoring of the level, the rationing of the care will return. The wellspring teaching requires regular returning to, not because it doesn't work, but because the habit of the container is strong, and the habit of the spring must be practiced until it becomes the natural way of seeing. Each time you feel depleted, the invitation is the same. Stop drawing. Allow the rest that is trying to happen. Trust the spring, not as a technique of self-improvement, as the genuine recognition of what you actually are. You do not need to remember everything you heard tonight. If one image stayed with you, the spring rising in the dark, the channel that moves in both directions, the courage at the depth of you waiting for the path to clear, let that be enough. Wherever you are right now, you are welcome here, exactly as you are, with the thin surface and the deep spring, with whatever has been given today and whatever is rising tonight. The wellspring does not rest, but the vessel does, and the vessel is resting now. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at the Tao at Night.